Good morning and welcome to our legislative briefing on Assembly Bill 979, which would call for greater ethnic diversity on our corporate boards of our California companies. My name is Carl Guardino. I'm Executive Vice President for Bloom Energy, and we are honored to be joined by HP Inc. this morning with their General Counsel, Harvey Anderson, and 6 key leaders of our California State Legislative Delegation to speak about the importance of this legislation to have a stronger and more vibrant and more rich economy in California that reflects the wonderful ethnic diversity of the Golden State. We understand as well that with the challenges facing our state, with rolling blackouts and potential PSPS events, that it makes internet connection a bit more challenging this morning. And so we ask all of you for your patience as we communicate this important message about
And Carl, I think that we're having some audio issues with you. Do you want to take your video off? Maybe that would help.
Improving and enhancing clearly communicate with each of you this morning. Again, I've stopped my video to improve our internet connection so that we can clearly communicate with all of our participants this morning. Again, this is Carl Guardino with Bloom Energy, where our mission is to ensure that we have clean, reliable energy that is affordable to everyone in the world, and that resilient, reliant energy couldn't be more important than what we as Californians are once again facing. A few logistical items that will be helpful to us all this morning. Our virtual event is being recorded. I want to repeat, we are recording our virtual event. We've already had requests from numerous media outlets who are focused this morning on the wildfire, that they want to have this news feed for their broadcasts. So we are recording this morning. All of our attendees are currently on mute and will take themselves off of mute as we speak. We will take questions after all of our speakers have shared their brief remarks. During this briefing, you can share your specific questions in the Q&A box, which we will address during the Q&A period. You can also share you can also raise your hand and share in the comment box so that you can ask your questions via live video this morning. With that, it is such an honor and a pleasure to welcome our legislators who have joined us this morning, who are working constantly to strengthen the economic vitality of our state, as well as our quality of life for all 40 million Californians. We would like to start this morning by hearing from our private sector partners as to why Assembly Bill 979 is important to them, their companies, their corporate cultures. It is with great pleasure that I have the opportunity to introduce my colleague, the Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer of Bloom Energy, Sonja Wilkerson. Sonja?
Thank you, Carl, for the introduction, and it's certainly an honor to be here in support of the bill. Again, my name is Sonja Wilkerson. I'm the Executive Vice President, Chief People Officer with Bloom Energy. As you may know, Bloom Energy is a clean energy company that was founded 19 years ago, with a significant portion of our manufacturing conducted right here in our lovely Golden State of California, which we're very proud of. Bloom was founded by our visionary CEO, K.R. Sridhar, who is not only committed to building a great company, but equally committed to building a great culture. that brings value through inclusion and diversity. And it's important to note for Bloom, we lead with inclusion because we believe that reinforces diversity and diversity of thought. Out of 9 of our board of directors, 1/3 are from underrepresented groups. So when we say diversity, we really mean it. Out of our executive leadership team, 1/3 are women and 1/3 is from ethnic minority groups. And just as important, a large percentage of our employee population are from underrepresented ethnic minority communities. At Bloom, we know that a diverse workforce and diverse leadership team makes for diverse backgrounds and experiences and point of views, which ultimately leads to better decisions for the company, for our customers, and for our shareholders. As noted in a Harvard Business Review, as well as in a McKinsey report, but I'll start with the Harvard Business Review. Diverse boards contribute to better decisions for the company, as well as improved governance, and it gives companies the ability to respond faster to very, very shifting environments that sometimes we're not even aware of as the shifts come. The McKinsey report actually went one step further by highlighting that 35%, that companies, diverse companies, are 35% more likely to outperform non-diverse companies. This is why diversity is so important to us. I'd like to restate Bloom's mission, which is Bloom's mission is to make clean energy reliable and affordable to everyone in the world. In these challenging times, that mission is not only inspiring, it's actually essential. It's essential for California, it's essential for the world. We know that most effective in achieving our mission is through diversity of our employee population, diversity of our leadership team, and this team best serves our customers as well as the communities that we serve, which is critical to us as a company. For these reasons, we are honored to support AB 979. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Carl. Thank you, Carl.
Sonja Wilkerson, Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer of Bloom Energy, thank you for sharing from an employer perspective. We're now going to hear from Harvey Anderson, the General Counsel of HP.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you for Assembly members for organizing this session. It's great to speak to you.
Harvey Anderson.
Today. Yep, I'm here. Did I lose my audio?
We can hear you just fine.
No, you are fine. Harvey Anderson, General Counsel of HP Inc. We are delighted to be hearing from you this morning. Please.
Thank you, Carl. And as I started, thank you for the opportunity to speak and share. We appreciate the chance to testify earlier. So you guys are doing good work with this. Sorry about the background noise here, but I wanted to say also bringing this important issue forward matches all of the values of Hewlett-Packard. We're proud to have a extremely diverse board, probably one of the most diverse boards in the tech sector. We have 58% of our board is minorities, 42% women, and 33% from underrepresented communities as defined in the bill. We understand that one of the goals of AB 979 is to encourage board diversity, but also to encourage diversity within that diversity, and we support that as well. So we understand what we're trying to get to long term. And really, long term, we won't have bills like this. That's the state I think that we want to get to. That's the vision where we don't have to mandate this kind of work. So And I really have to say, I'm proud to work at a company that had embraced these values long before I got there. I've only been there for 3 years as their general counsel, but this was deep in HP's DNA. So we think it's important to set high standards for corporate board diversity. And for that reason, we support the bill. And from the tops down, we see the value of diversity. It actually, it makes the board function better. And if you start at the top, I think you get those trickle down effects, and it changes the culture immensely when you have the leaders, because then they will select the next group of leaders. So again, thank you for your work. We're proud to be a part of this. There's much more to be done. We recently doubled our pledge to, we pledged to double our number of Black and African American executives by 2025. So there's plenty of work to be done in this space. But we have to do it more aggressively, clearly. So I want to say thank you, and I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Harvey Anderson, thank you for your articulate words and for reminding all of us that when we're sheltered in place, we get great sound effects in our background as well. Thank you for not even breaking stride in such challenging and trying times for all of us. Lots of mercy and grace right now, right? With that, it is such an honor to introduce a longtime leader in our communities and in our California legislature, the author of Assembly Bill 979, a leader in the Legislative Black Caucus, and the chair of the Utilities and Commerce Committee in our state assembly, the Honorable Chris Holden.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate the kind introduction. And I also want to say thank you to Sonja and to Harvey for being here and being so committed to diversity in the corporate environment. So I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak on this very important subject. Inequality has been woven into the fabric of our society and can be as blatant as police brutality or as subtle as empty corporate promises to increase diversity. If we are going to address racial injustice and inequality in our society, it is imperative that corporate boards reflect the diversity of our state. That is why I introduced AB 979 with the support of my colleagues here today. AB 979 requires minimum of 1 director from an underrepresented community on all boards of publicly traded corporations headquartered in California by the end of 2021. The bill will also require a minimum of 2 directors from underrepresented communities for boards that have 5 to 8 directors and 3 directors for boards with more than 9 directors by the end of 2022. In light of recent racial and social injustice protests, corporations across the country have conducted reviews of their workforce and have made promises to increase diversity. Yet the percentage of people of color being hired and promoted across industries has not changed. Severe underrepresentation at the professional levels is pervasive, even when there is a robust population of qualified candidates to fill every entry-level and managerial position. For example, in Silicon Valley, Black and Latino tech employees average less than 10% of workers at premier companies such as Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, and LinkedIn. This percentage is disproportionate to the roughly 20% of computer science graduates that are Black and Latino. Across industries, Asians and Pacific Islanders make up a greater percentage of the white-collar workforce, but are the least likely to be promoted and moved up the ladder. One way to attract and retain diverse talent is by having directors from underrepresented communities. A diverse board contributes to a company that values diversity and can readily adapt to the changing needs of its workforce and customer base. One great benefit of diversifying a board of directors, corporations with ethnically diverse boards have shown to outperform those that lack diversity. In 2018, as was mentioned by Sonja, the U.S. Department of Labor Bureau of Statistics reported that 90% of chief executives across industries in the United States were white. This year, the Latino Corporate Board of Directors concluded that 35% of corporations headquartered in California had all white boards. The LA Times reported that the percentage of Black and Latino tech executives averaged 3%. Likewise, a study by the Greenlighting Institute revealed that only 30% of directors at the top 10 leading banks are people of color. These statistics pale in comparison to the 67% of California's population that are people of color. When many corporations have not been able to willing to make meaningful change, HP and Bloom Energy have made strides in diversifying the corporate landscape. These two groups have shown that the intent of AB 979 is not impossible, but attainable. People of color must have a seat at the table where an overwhelming amount of wealth is based, especially in a state as diverse as California. Now, when we are seeing the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on communities of color, it is the right time to pass AB 979. Thank you very much.
Assemblyman Holden, thank you again for your leadership and for carrying this visionary and important piece of legislation. We're now going to hear from co-authors on the bill, and I am wise enough to know, with such esteemed legislative leaders, that alphabetical order is the safest and wisest course of action. So let me first start with co-author David Chiu, the chair of the Assembly Housing Committee and the chair of the API Caucus. Assemblyman Chiu, welcome and thank you.
Thank you to my good friend Carl Guardino. And I also, of course, want to thank HP and Bloom Energy for not only representing the very best of 21st century innovation when it comes to what corporate leadership looks like, but also a 21st century workforce when it comes to the diversity of what corporate America ought to look like. And of course, I want to salute our great colleague, Chris Holden, for his leadership, as well as the leadership represented in the diversity of our legislature here on today's call. In recent years, alongside our Black and Latino caucuses, our API Legislative Caucus has prioritized diversity in executive management and leadership along a variety of different sectors in our economy. And in recent months, racial disparities have been illuminated in every aspect of our society, revealing the systemic barriers that have prevented us from truly achieving equality. And so I'm honored to be a joint author of AB 979 that recognizes that corporate leadership has to be diverse to guide companies to make the right decisions for our very, very diverse California and our country. As the chair of the API Caucus, I'm going to spend a few moments just focusing on the API corporate experience. Asian Americans are the fastest growing ethnic group in our country, nearly 6% nationwide, 15% in California. But despite the fact that our numbers at the rank and file levels at many companies are okay, APIs only hold 3.7% of all Fortune 500 board seats. And despite the significant contributions of Asian Americans in corporate America, about 3/4 of all Fortune 1000 companies do not have a single API perspective in their boardroom. There are two issues that our community discusses often about corporate America. First is the model minority myth, the stereotype that Asian Americans are performing well, which has served to mask challenges that our communities face. Second, we often talk about the bamboo ceiling, referring to barriers in corporate America that APIs are having trouble cracking. For example, a few years ago in Silicon Valley, in the tech industry, the percentage of Asian American executives has only been slightly more than half of the percentage of APIs in the overall workforce. This represents the largest negative disparity between the representation within the workforce vis-a-vis executives among all ethnic groups. A recent study by the Ascend Foundation found in California that Asian Americans are least likely to be promoted to management and executive positions. And that is why this bill is so strongly supported by a wide variety of API organizations, including the Ascend Foundation, the Asian Pacific Islander Public Affairs, PAPA, the League of Cities API Caucus, the Asian Law Caucus, the National APA Bar Association, and many more. We're at a historic inflection point in our society. We need to rise to the challenge. We need to answer the call. And because of that, again, appreciate all of you being part of this conversation and look forward to pushing this through in the coming days and weeks. Thanks.
Assemblymember David Chiu, thank you for articulating so well the challenges we face and the opportunities that we have to move forward in a more equitable way on these important issues. I want to thank and welcome the Honorable Cristina Garcia for joining us today, co-author of Assembly Bill 979, and especially now with what our state is going through, the chair of the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change. Assemblymember Garcia.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Mr. Holden and Bloom Energy for having me here today. Since we first got elected to the legislature, a number of us have been trying to work with California's corporations, especially the tech industry, to get them to diversify their boards and their workforce on their own. Unfortunately, that has not occurred for most corporations, which is why this legislation is so important now. California's population is 39% Latino, but of 662, let me repeat that, of 662 public corporations in California, 571 do not have Latino representation on their boards. Asian and Pacific Islanders make up a combined 16% of the population, yet only 3.7% of directors of Fortune 500 companies are Asian and Pacific Islander. A recent USC and Equity Center study also shows that Blacks tend to be employed in lowest paying, least powerful positions. The statistics are clear. If you're a person of color, you're not trying to break a glass ceiling because you're not even let in the door. We must do better than that, and the time is now. Studies have shown that corporations with a more diverse and equitable board improve company governance and have better decision-making, which leads to a more successful company. Diversity and equity on corporate boards is necessary for the health of the company while also providing opportunities to those who experience racism and microaggressions on a daily basis. Over the last few months, we've seen a racial reckoning triggered by the George Floyd killing. The public continues to protest, demanding that we tear down racial biases, starting with our police departments, but really demanding that racial biases be torn down in all our systems. The message is loud and clear from the public. We, the legislature, must do all we can to prioritize racial equity and equity now. We can no longer wait to answer the cries for racial justice. We as legislators have the ability and the responsibility to go beyond a social media post. We have the power to pass meaningful legislation now, which is why AB 979 is so important and why I'm so honored to be a joint author with all of our members here today. Thank you.
Assemblymember Garcia, thank you for those sobering yet also inspiring remarks. We appreciate your leadership in the legislature and in our communities. We are so honored to have also join us the Honorable Eloise Gomez Reyes, co-author of Assembly Bill 979 and chair of the Human Services Committee in the State Assembly. Assemblymember Reyes, thank you for joining us. And if you can turn on your microphone, you are on mute. We'll give this just a moment. Assemblymember Reyes,
that would help, wouldn't it, Carl?
Thank you. We're so honored that you've joined us this morning.
Thank you, Carl. And good morning, and I want to thank everyone who's joining us today. I want to also start by thanking Assemblymember Holden for being a leader on this issue going back several years, not just this year, but several years when he first led the effort on similar legislation. I think it's critical and it's so important that we encourage and maintain diversity on boards of directors as they make crucial decisions that affect many groups of people. Ensuring diversity on our corporate boards isn't just the right thing to do. It's the prudent step in the direction of inclusion and equity so that the boards of California companies actually reflect the diversity of our state. The benefits of diversity in the boardroom have been proven, and I know that my colleagues have talked about this. Diverse boardrooms help address complex problems as the dialogue from differing views can lead to a more thoughtful decision-making process. A diverse boardroom is more representative of shareholders. And as has been mentioned before, a diverse boardroom is good for the bottom line. Studies have shown that companies ranked in the top 25% of diversity are more profitable than those in the bottom 25% of diversity. As the most diverse state in the nation, as a state that always leads the way, our corporate boards must reflect what makes California so great, and that is our diversity. We have a real opportunity through AB 979 to show the world, show the United States, and most importantly, our youth, that California is going to lead the way on doing what is right and doing what makes sense. Thank you for having us, and I'm also a very proud joint author of AB 979.
Thank you, Assemblymember Reyes, for your leadership on this issue and on so many other issues of importance to our state. It is truly my pleasure to next introduce the chair of the Assembly Appropriations Committee and chair of the Latino Caucus, someone who I've enjoyed working with on many issues to strengthen our economy and the equity of our state. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Lorena Gonzalez.
Thank you, Carl. And I want to thank Bloom Energy and HP for bringing us together to talk about this really important subject. I want to thank my colleague, Assemblymember Holden, for bringing this to the forefront. And of course, my Latina sisters, Cristina Garcia and Eloise Reyes, for being co-authors on this important measure. A few years ago, I was a joint author on SB 826. That was the bill that said that corporations needed to open up, California corporations needed to place a woman on the board. And while we were going through that process, a lot of people tried to pit people of color against women. We had actually, unfortunately, some companies come in and say, well, if I put a woman on, it's going to take the place of a Black male. And we said, that is ridiculous. We can do it all. And your company needs it all. They need female representation and they need people of color. And guess what? Some women are people of color as well. And so we passed that law, and most California corporations have in fact abided by it, if you will. However, of the 511 women placed on boards since SB 826, only 17 have been Latinas. 3.3% of the women on boards are Latinas, even though we represent 20% of the population in California. Latinos overall are 40%, but when you look at women of color, we're even further back in the representation. And why does that matter? Because when you look at things like the pay gap, we also are further back. So while we often talk about women making 80 cents on the dollar of their white male counterparts, when you look at African-American women, it's about 60 cents on the dollar. And when you look at Latinas, it's about 54 cents on the dollar. And unfortunately, when you look at Latinas in California, it's a staggering 44 cents on the dollar. We know that if we don't have representation on those corporate boards, there seems to be just a missing voice in equity. And that's what we're looking for here. But it's not just good for Latina and Latino workers and African-American workers and Asian workers. It's good for the companies themselves. And this is what is the case we want to make. Our diversity should reflect everybody's clients. Our diversity helps you reach those clients. Our diversity brings a different way of thinking about problems and solutions to the table. We know we have qualified candidates out there, and we know it's time to diversify the boardroom. So thank you so much, Mr. Holden, for bringing this forward. And I know I want to thank Carl for doing an alphabetical order, because nobody ever wants to follow our next assemblyman. So thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gonzalez. And I forgot to mention, you're also a proud alumni of Stanford University. And as Assemblymember Gonzalez just referred to, our next speaker is not only the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus and Assembly Budget Subcommittee chair, but a former professor whose courses I would have never missed because of her dynamic approach to educating young people. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Shirley Weber.
Good morning, and thank you, Carl, and thanks to all of those of you who've been on this press conference thus far. I want to especially thank my colleague, Chris Holden, who has been persistent and consistent about his commitment to this issue. I want to thank him because in the midst of this pandemic, we thought about everything else but this, but Chris did not. He brought it to the Black Caucus and reminded us of what we had wanted to do some years ago. And in doing so, made us understand the true connection of diversity throughout the entire state. That these young people were not just protesting about police, but they were protesting about their lives, about what was happening to them and what they saw was not going to happen for them in the future. They were concerned about the growing amount of racism in this country and how it would impact them and their future. Not just African Americans, but all students were in the streets protesting because they understood the connection between them and everyone else. And that's why this is so important, because oftentimes we only think of it in terms of the dollars and cents and what happens in the end in terms of those who get positions that might enhance their resume or those kinds of things, or the corporation might basically enhance its bottom line. But we forget to realize that everything we do is a direct reflection of who we are as a people. And having boards that don't look like the people they want to serve has a real devastating effect upon young people as they look at their future and what they can aspire to become in California and how California will or will not respond to their needs. And so when we look at this, we have to go and look at the bigger picture. What does California often project itself to be? We are seen as a progressive state. We're seen as a state who always takes these stands that nobody else will take. We're always moving forward, supposedly. And yet people fail to realize that that means all of us, not just in the educational system, not just in terms of law enforcement, not just in terms of our courts and social justice issues, not just in terms of how we care for the poor and the homeless, but it also talks about our corporations and how they see themselves in this picture of change and how they see themselves as a part of California's legacy and California's culture. And for that reason, it is imperative that our boards reflect the community and the people of California. I often challenge my colleagues in the Assembly and in the Senate to make sure their staff is a reflection of California. Too often I go into offices and they don't reflect California. And I say to them very honestly, how can you expect to represent everyone of California if you have no one on your staff who is poor, no one on your staff who's a person of color, no one on your staff who's young, and no one on your staff who's old? How can you expect to actually hear the voices of California when they're not already whispering in your ear with every decision you make? We hope those who serve on the board will constantly be the voice, not just the symbol of diversity, but the voice of diversity in the decisions that are made, so that we make better decisions and we grow as a result of it. When I was on the school board, we insisted on diversity in leadership. And I would often have a superintendent come and say to me, you know, I don't have a so-and-so on my board. I don't have an Asian on my board, as the Asian population was growing in San Diego. And we had great people. And so we always had this diversity, and it enhanced every decision we made about student success, programs that worked, that didn't work, and how we were going to move this district under Payson forward to basically represent every community that was there. It is imperative that we see this as merely one of many pieces that have to exist, but it's surely an important part. So I want to thank Chris and thank the Black Caucus for pushing it. I want to thank all the other caucuses who signed on as co-authors on this bill, that this is important, that as we talk about all those heavy issues that we have to talk about, that sometimes gives us heartburn at night, that having corporate boards that are really a reflection of California is as critical as everything else we do. And thank you, Carl, for your participation, for your leadership. Thank HP for being here for us as well. And we know the other corporations will join in. Oftentimes, they just need a little push. They need someone to stand up and say, it's time to do it. And we will hopefully, through this legislation, give them the opportunity and the power and the force and the push to do so. Thank you so much.
Dr. Shirley Weber, thank you for those inspiring remarks. You never disappoint. As I look at AB 979, it reminds me that in these times, we need to speak up, stand up, and step up. Speak up is we need our collective voices, as we've heard this morning. Stand up is for legislation ranging on all of the challenges that we face as we do our best to reflect the rich value of a diverse society. And step up is we as corporate leaders, like Bloom Energy, like HP Inc., actually moving forward, not just with our words, but by our actions. That's why we are so honored to join you this morning in this important effort to pass Assembly Bill 979. I want to remind our participants who have been listening in this morning, this is your opportunity now to our media to ask questions. As a reminder, there are two ways you can ask a question. First, you can share your specific question in the Q&A box, which our moderators, our communications team at Bloom Energy will read. Please ensure you specify as to whom your question is directed, or you can also raise your virtual hand or share in the comment box, and we will call on you so that you can ask your question via live video. So again, to our journalists on the line, to our other leaders on the line, please, this is your opportunity to ask your questions. And again, we will wait to be informed by our moderators on the Bloom Energy communications team.
Hi, Carl. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So legislative members, what has been the response amongst your colleagues, and do you have the votes to get this passed?
Great question. We'll open that up to the chair and anyone else who would like to comment. And a reminder to our legislators, please take yourself off of mute as you respond. Chair Holden?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the question. This bill has been presented to Senate Banking, and it has received a supportive vote from that committee. We had no members of the committee that voted against it. There was a clear recognition that the goals and objectives that were outlined were appropriate, were timely. We had two Republicans, both stayed off the bill, but it was, I think, a recognition of sort of the understanding of the moment and the importance of moving the bill forward. But we did have good support. It's now in Senate Appropriations. The communications that I've had with the chair have been positive, and so we're hopeful. This bill calls for the Secretary of State to work with these corporations to make sure that they're in compliance. There is some fiscal impact associated with their hiring a couple of additional folks to be able to implement, but we think that this is all absorbable and moving forward. We're expecting a letter of support from the Secretary of State, who has weighed in and indicated he will support the bill. We've also have three other constitutional officers who have endorsed this bill as well. Betty Yee and Fiona Ma and Ricardo Lara have all indicated support for the bill. So I think that is sort of indicative of sort of a broad base of support. I've not heard any of my colleagues, even though the bill hasn't been formally presented to any other members just yet, but I think that it will be favorably received once it makes its way out of Senate Appropriations and to the floor. Senator Steve Bradford, who is the vice chair of the caucus, we're looking for him to be the floor manager of the bill, and so we believe that there will be, at the end of the day, great support in recognizing the timeliness and appropriateness of the bill and what it's designed to accomplish.
If I could just add that in Senate Banking and Finance, we did have a Republican vote for this bill as well.
Yes, Senator Ling Ling Chang supported the bill. which passed with 6 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 person not voting. And we think that's indicative of the importance of the issue, the timeliness of this important issue, and the leadership of the author and all of you as co-authors and supporters. Would any of our other legislators like to address that question before we move on to our next question? Then we will move on. Moderator, Jennifer, the next question, please.
Absolutely. I think this is similar to what we were just discussing. How soon might we see this on the governor's desk and implemented?
We like that optimism. Assemblymember Holden, would you like to start?
Well, I think, yeah, we all are optimistic. I think we would, we're cautiously optimistic, but the suspense hearing would take place tomorrow. So it is, by that time, we will know that the bill is moving. We're very hopeful that it will be. It will be let off of suspense. It would then go to the floor. Obviously, we don't have a lot of time. We have next week to have committees review these bills. We'll hopefully then clear the floor of the Senate, make its way to the Assembly at the first part of next week. Because this is a bill that was amended in the Senate, it will probably have to go to a committee of policy in the Assembly, but by probably midweek, certainly before the end of the 31st, we should have the bill adopted and on its way to the governor.
Would any other legislators like to weigh in on that question as well? If not, we will move to the next question. Jennifer?
This question is for either Sonja or Mr. Anderson, Mrs. Wilkerson or Mr. Anderson. So looking at HP and Bloom's respective boards and management teams, you can see that there is diversity that is reflected both ethnically and from a gender perspective. Are there any anecdotes you would like to share about why diversity has helped your company?
Sure, I'll step in with a very short anecdote, which clearly reflects the power of diversity within the Bloom community. As you know, we've all faced the COVID-19 crisis. And Bloom is, we have essential workers who are coming to work every day on the ground, who have to be there. And we recognize, my internet is a bit off, so we during that time, when it first hit in the March timeframe, we brought a diverse group of leaders together to quickly address safety. Safety is our priority as a company. And based on the multiple points of views, I believe we were able to quickly come up with the best solutions possible to protect our employees. There was debate on how to do it. There was never a question on should we do it. It was we were leading with safety. And we have really performed extremely well and kept our employees safe in a really uncertain time as a result of the diverse leadership coming together to quickly deploy solutions. So that's an example of how it's worked for us on the ground real time. And we're really proud of the outcome that we're receiving so far. We're keeping our fingers crossed.
Sonja Wilkerson, Chief People Officer of Bloom Energy, thank you for that response. General Counsel for HP Inc., Harvey Anderson, would you like to respond as well?
Yeah, I'd love to. Great question. And I think I see two things that come to mind. The first is it's just understood that this diversity issue, the D&I issue, is not a numbers game. It's about creating better outcomes. And we get better outcomes when we have diverse, inclusive environments. And the board deeply believes that. Inherently believes that, and the actions have shown that based on the composition of the boards. But a recent story that to me reflects how that happened. After George Floyd was killed and the protests began, you know, as all of us were just kind of watching this, not understanding it, there's day one, day two, day three, and the feeling and the disorientation and the disruption that was, sorry about that, I lost my video, that was going on. Within several days, like really quickly, our CEO, one of our board members, sent out a note to the entire employee base about the protest. That to me shows what happens when you have diverse leadership. They understand what's going on. They quickly understood how important that moment was and that you needed to talk to your employee base and create a space for them. That, and I have to tell you, that was the first time in my 30 years of corporate experience that has actually happened. And that happened because the leadership understood. They were diverse. They got it. They saw what was going on, and they saw the bigger arc that's even happening going forward. So I'll stop there. Thank you for asking that question.
Harvey Anderson and Sonja Wilkerson, thank you for sharing such important and inspiring and essential messages as to why this is a bold step, perhaps, but an important step for our state to move in. Assemblymember Holden, we are about out of time, but I think it only appropriate, sir, as the author of AB 979, for you to have any final remarks before we all let you get back to helping move our state in the right direction in these trying times. Assemblyman Holden?
Thank you, Carl. And again, I want to thank Bloom for setting up this webinar, this press conference opportunity to share with others the passion that we all have behind promoting and creating opportunity for diversity to flourish in California. Let me just say too that to Bloom Energy and to HP that we appreciate your stepping forward. I think that the intentionality behind your corporate philosophy is one that, as we promote this issue of diversity in the corporate environment, that those companies that are out there doing the right thing and recognizing the value of diversity should be highlighted and should be saluted. And so we salute you this morning and thank you for your doing it when nobody was watching, doing the right thing. And I also want to just thank my colleagues who have all spoken this morning, because they all have had such a long career of fighting for the little guy, for fighting for the people who, as was described earlier, are on the outside looking in and who want a piece of this American dream, and to be doing the right thing, working hard, sometimes being the first from their family to go and complete college, to make their way into the workforce. We need to know that they have a level playing field, that those doors are going to be open to them, that they can sail to the highest level in society wherever their hopes and dreams take them. And so we see this as I think Harvey at one point described it in a conversation as sort of blowing the doors off of the corporate boardroom. However, it's ultimately viewed that it creates in terms of attitudes that will provide a chance to see the real progress take hold, not just from your two companies and others that are also stepping up, but from every company that is headquartered in the state for doing likewise. So again, thank you, and thank my colleagues. They're all very much an inspiration to me.
Assemblymember Holden, thank you so much for your leadership and your partnership. This will conclude our news conference webinar this morning. Let's all put shoulder to the wheel, hand in hand, and advance AB 979 together as we advance our state. Thank you all.